Hello everybody. We've seen a couple of paintings depicting Dunedin's favourite man of God, Reverend Dr. Donald Stewart, in previous episodes of Talking Pictures. But there are enough images of him in the museum's collection to fill up a whole episode on their own. So here goes. Dr. Stewart arrived in Otago on the Bosworth in January 1860. The foundation stone for Dunedin's second Presbyterian church building had been laid before he got here, and in May 1860 Knox Church opened and Dr. Stewart became its minister. The congregation soon outgrew the original church building, and on the 25th of November 1872, exactly 300 years since the death of John Knox, the foundation stone for the present Robert Lawson designed church was laid. It took 4 years to build and opened on the 5th of November 1876. Now this isn't going to be so much the story of Dr. Stewart himself. For that, check out the Pioneer Stories from Southern New Zealand episode about him that you'll also find here on our YouTube channel. Instead, we're going to concentrate on the representations of Dr. Stewart, starting with this lithograph by James Brown, which likely shows Dr. Stewart during the early years of his ministry at Knox, when he would have been in his 40s. James Brown and his wife Anne had arrived in Otago a decade before Dr. Stewart. Although a calico printer and pattern designer in Scotland and England, James became an engraver, printer, artist and cartoonist here. In 1868, printers Lister and Gresham produced a series of lithographed portraits of local clergymen and political figures drawn by David Henderson, including this one of Dr. Stewart, and this one of Reverend Dr. Thomas Burns. This portrait, dated 1879, is based on a photograph of Dr. Stewart that was taken about 10 years earlier. The painting is by Joanna Flanagan, who studied and exhibited at the Dunedin School of Art in the 1870s and was married to William Sibbald by Dr. Stewart at Knox Church in 1880. The book on the table has Milton on the spine. This is presumably a reference to the 17th century English writer John Milton, who abandoned the Church of England to become a staunch Presbyterian. In 1884, a montage of photographic portraits of office bearers of Knox Church, with Dr. Stewart in the centre, was produced by Dunedin portrait photographer John Richard Morris. Some of our drawn or painted portraits of Dr. Stewart are based on this photograph, or ones very similar, perhaps taken on the same day. This one, signed M. Cable, is drawn in crayon on the photograph. It was donated to the museum by John Cable, whose then Presbyterian parents, James Cable and Sarah Cable, née Brown, were married by Dr. Stewart at Knox Church in 1871. James and Sarah later left Knox Church to join the Primitive Methodist congregation in Dundas Street. And John, who was born in 1887, grew up to become an Anglican vicar. Here's another work again on or based on a similar photograph. The Dictionary of New Zealand Biography says of Dr. Stewart that over 6 feet in height, he was instantly recognisable by the plaid he wore draped over his shoulders. Plaid that is today preserved in the museum's collection. In later years, Dr. Stewart was also sometimes depicted with a walking stick, one of which was likewise donated to the museum in the 1920s. And in this hand-coloured photograph, the walking stick is one presented to Dr. Stewart in May 1888, when he was Chief of the Gaelic Society of New Zealand, and presented to the museum 40 years later in 1928. This drawing depicts policeman Sergeant Major Bevan mistakenly nabbing Dr. Stewart when Stewart was on a charitable errand one night. Dr. Stewart had gotten ready for bed, then remembered he'd forgotten to send some bedding to a woman in need. Many would have let it wait until the morning, but not Dr. Stewart. Off he went, only to be apprehended by Sergeant Major Bevan on suspicion of burglary. The same incident is likely also recalled in these two pictures. The artist who created this portrait Kenneth Diaz, was described in November 1894 as being recently from the Old Country. Diaz had studied painting at the Glasgow School of Art and in France, and before coming here, he had been based in London. Dr. Stewart had passed away on the 12th of May 1894, shortly before Diaz arrived in Dunedin, suggesting once again that this portrait was painted from a photograph. This very similar portrait, perhaps based on the same photograph, is signed S. Corbett. It was donated by Frances Corbett, who arrived in Dunedin with her parents John and Sophia and her siblings in 1862. John and Sophia had more children here, and one of them, also named Sophia, was a student at the Dunedin School of Art in the 1890s. Sophia appears to have been at the Dunedin School of Art at the same time as one of the city's most celebrated artists, Francis Hodgkins, who attended the school in 1895 and 1896, and who also painted a portrait of Dr. Stewart. Representations of Dr. Stewart weren't limited to drawings and paintings. Here he is carved into the top of a clock case. Several sculptures were also made, at least one of them while Dr. Stewart was still alive. It was displayed at the Dunedin Industrial Exhibition in 1881 and was said to be a rather crude piece of work, but was at least recognisable as being Dr. Stewart. A death mask, an impression of the face of a corpse, was often taken to assist sculptors in making memorial statues of the deceased. Dr. Stewart's death mask was donated to the museum in 1911. This plaster bust in the museum's collection that was made by plasterer William Newman was likely made after Stewart's death. 6 months after Stewart's passing, it was sent to Wellington to be exhibited at a gathering of old Otago settlers. The Carrara marble bust that stands in the grounds of Knox Church is said to have been sculpted in Italy based on photographs supplied after Dr. Stewart's death, and is thought to have been delivered to Dunedin monumental mason George Munro about 1898. It went on display at Knox after being donated by Munro's successor H.S. Bingham in 1946. As for the iconic public memorial in Queen's Gardens, that was designed by Leslie Morrison of Wellington and cast in bronze by W. Moore of London. It was unveiled in 1898. That brings us to the end of another episode of Talking Pictures. See you next time, and thanks for watching.